morning. Thank
Good
you
morning.
for joining me here at the Confos Storyburgh. I don't know what the number is for this year or the episode, but I'm so happy to see you again after I don't know how many years, probably during COVID or whatever.
Yeah, at least several years. Yeah.
Yeah, and we met at the CHS at the Adrien Walnoha's office. What does CHS stand for again?
Community Human Services Corporation.
Okay, all right. That's on the Liberty Avenue. So, right, I think we were working on, or we're trying to work on some homelessness. Right. And were you also in the?
I was on their board for a while as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right.
But we met before I was on the board.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. Okay. So so that's how we met, and it's been almost 10 years, probably, right? 2016.
Oh, longer. Yeah, I think. Yeah, just going back.
Yeah.
At least 10 years. Yeah.
Probably. I started Storyburgh in 2015, so I remember that it was one of the tasks by the NSR New Sunrising boot camp. It's a long time ago, so I don't know the proper name. Sorry, Scott. It was back in Allentown, and one of the tasks was to approach organizations or individuals that will be helping Storyburgh, building the business plan and whatever, making sure that our ID actually works. And CHS was one of the organizations that I approached, and that I met Adrien, and then Adrien invited me to her office, a gorgeous office, by the way. And then, I remember when I was walking in, there was you, I think. Yeah. So. All right. So it's been a long time. So you mentioned in the Google form recently, okay, how do you introduce yourself? And you said here, I just want to quote it, so make sure that, because I built stories out of this statement. Okay, you are the Pittsburgh area resident, you're author, you're seminary graduate, right?
Yes.
And then software executive.
Yes.
Right. That's multiple lifetimes for some people. So we're going to be here for all day. Okay. It's all right. Bear with me until I think the battery runs out or we get kicked out. Anyways, but I'm just kidding. We're not going to get kicked out. So usually I like to start off where you live, so people know. People know. So where do you live now?
Well, unlike folks that are born in Pittsburgh, I arrived here for graduate school. Actually, in the early 90s, I was in a doctoral program at Pitt. And at the time I was living at the seminary. So I lived in East Liberty at Pittsburgh Theological Seminary, but I didn't go there. I actually attended Princeton Theological Seminary. But they had a housing program. So that's what brought me to Pittsburgh.
Okay.
And my wife was also at Pitt at the time, doing a master's in social work. And she was also living at the seminary because they had a housing contract with the School of Social Work. So it was just a matter of time before we both sat on a PAT bus, and we were married a year later. So you never know who you're going to meet on a PAT bus.
And then the seminary housing too.
That's right. So we had an adjoining wall.
Seriously, you're not kidding.
So, Sarah, met my wife. She actually came here from Nicaragua, and in college, I had traveled through Central America and Nicaragua, specifically in the 80s during the Contra War. So we had a lot to talk about, and that was, she was living with the Sisters of St. Joseph up in Baden at that time. And then after we were married, we lived all around the East End. I mean, we were mostly in Squirrel Hill and two different places, all around Beechwood Boulevard.
Okay.
The Blue Slide Park. And then later, we ended up moving out to Fox Chapel for almost 20 years.
Mm-hmm.
And then out kind of on that little, now we're a sliver of Plum right above the Oakmont Golf Course
Okay.
now.
So I'm showing the audience right now that map, Plum, because, geography is hard.
It's a huge borough.
Yes, look at that. Look at that. It is crazy. It's bigger than all the entire downtown and East End combined.
Yeah.
Or even Wilkinsburg as well, right? So right here, downtown, this is where we are right now, downtown. This is East Liberty, and this is Plum. Wow.
Yeah, but we're pretty close to Oakmont.
Okay.
Just above.
Right here.
Yeah, just above New Kensington.
Yeah, because.
And it's a quiet little area, except when the PGA Tour, is in town.
the senior,
when the U.S. Open is at Oakmont, it's a little crazy.
Yeah, I remember that visiting you when you were still at Sharpsburg, right, or Fox Chapel.
Yeah, we're just above Aspinwall.
Yeah,
right up the hill, right on Delafield.
Yeah,
we were there for many years.
Awesome.
But we love Pittsburgh. We still attend Sixth Presbyterian Church in Squirrel Hill. So, and Minio's has never been outdone in terms of pizza for me. So, I'm a Minio's loyalist.
So again, I don't know. My brain is fogging. So, were you born here?
No, I wasn't. So, where this all started, I grew up in Wenatchee, Washington. Right?
Washington State.
Wow. It's right in the center. Not many people know this unless you've been to Washington. Half the state is desert. They call it the Evergreen State, but half of it is total desert.
I didn't know. I've been to Washington State so many times.
Yeah.
I didn't know. I thought it was just all green like Oregon.
No, once you get over the mountains, it's pure desert.
Because it's next to Montana, or?
Well, you get over the Cascade Mountains and there's a huge rain shadow. So it's rainforest and, really wet. And then right as you get over the mountains, it turns arid and they get less than 10 inches of rain a year. So I grew up right on the edge of the desert in Wenatchee. Wow. And my parents were... my dad worked at Alcoa, so there's another Pittsburgh connection, and a smelter right there in Pittsburgh, which is interesting because years later I would end up doing a software project for Alcoa Corporate, which was really interesting, how full circle things, everything connects at some point. But I had joined my parents divorced when I was young. I was an emancipated minor at 16. So I was living away from home, finishing high school, and then with help, ended up at Whitworth College, now University in Spokane. And I studied sociology there. And sociology is a wonderful degree because that's where I learned software, statistics, social theory. My interest in sociology of religion came from that, which later took me to seminary. But for someone who ended up in the AI field, we all thought at the time, like, who does statistics? Oh, this is never going to be important. It changed the world.
Yeah.
It's changing the world in AI because all AI-based systems are based on some of the same math that's behind machine learning. And, anyone that had to do regression analysis,
right.
That's basically a precursor to certain machine learning models. So all of that started to connect, which we'll come back to. But I graduated from college and didn't have a job. And I had no home to return to, so I was going to be homeless.
After your sociology degree.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I had no job. And one of my professors got me into a research project with Indian Health Service Corporation in Sitka, Alaska. So I got this plane ticket. I didn't know who I was going to meet. And I flew to Sitka. And someone asked me on the plane, well, why are you here? What are you doing? And I told him my story. Well, who are you meeting? I don't know. They just gave me a ticket. I'm just showing up. But I learned so much working at an Indian Health Service hospital for a whole summer. And I'd already been accepted to Princeton at that point. But it became a really powerful theme for me just to learn about those communities in Southeast Alaska. And after seminary, I actually went back to Alaska and served at First Presbyterian Church of Fairbanks. And we had an Inuit church within our church, and they would preach in Inuit. And it was just a really neat thing to return to that. But I did go to seminary, and a lot of my professors at Whitworth, 2 of them actually got their PhDs from the seminary itself. So it's kind of following in my mentor's footsteps. But again, I had to make some money. So my first day on campus, I walked over to the computing center at Princeton, and I said, "Hey, I know SPSS. Give me a job." Some kid from Wenatchee, Washington thinks he's just going to walk in and get a stats job there. But they gave it to me on the spot. And so for the next 3 years, that was my side job. I'd be learning Hebrew over here and creating SPSS batch programs for university projects and things like that, helping out graduate students. And I put a lot of time there in thinking about sociology of religion. I got into deep philosophical studies, hermeneutics. So Hegel and Gadamer and Habermas and all these guys that were really deep into, I'll say it, the understanding of understanding.
It's like dream within the dream.
So that, and I also had a lot of interest in American religious history, the post-Darwinian controversies, and that's what really drove me later to Pitt for my doctoral work. Because I really became interested in that connection between science and religion and the paradigm shifts that happen. But all the while, I had this need to make some money because I eventually, after meeting Sarah, I dropped out of my program for a number of reasons, which I won't go into. They were all very sound, by the way.
Okay. I'm not speculating.
But really, I needed to make some money after my degree, and the odds of me landing work in my field, because I was pretty specialized at that point, was pretty low. So I started programming.
What was the specialty?
Well, I was going to be teaching American religious history, and if my degree wasn't from Yale, probably wasn't going to get a good run at a job coming out of Pitt. Just the specialization that I was studying. I think there were 4 positions open nationwide at the time that I was nearing my end of my second year.
So probably the drive to study that aspect, the sociology. I mean, I'm looking at that there are two things that drive you, right? The hunger for knowledge on the sociology, but then at the same time, the team that came up that you mentioned over and over again, it's a drive to get money, right?
You gotta live.
So I wonder, why didn't you go to finance or engineering or
Yeah.
So, but I bet the hunger for knowledge is really higher than.
Well, it's interesting is I've gravitated towards things where there's high unknowns. And software at the time was kind of like that, because there was no established way to get into software back in the early 90s and the 80s. A lot of people fell into it. You didn't even get a degree. And in the 70s, it was especially, it was that way. In fact, there were a lot more women, I heard, doing software development in the 70s before there were degree programs. So it I just kind of fell into it. And there was a local company here, maybe people heard of Lichen Home Medical. They later, Jim Lichen sold the company, but I spent several years with them. In the 90s, I learned client-server programming and all the languages that were coming out at the time. And ended up there and had a great time writing a lot of software, and then started consulting. And my wife's career was taking off. And we were just living. It was like you get your blinders on, because at that time we had young kids. And my focus anyways was I had to, set my studies aside for a while, but it was always there. And I was always thinking about it. And somewhere around 2000, I really got into software that had large impacts on people, human workflow. And the math elements of my background started to take hold in terms of what's the impact of software on large groups of people, workflow software, teams, efficiency. But there was also this element of social impact. As a sociologist, that seemed like a perfect problem to me. And then later, when I broke into the AI field, I was just like a pig in shit. I mean, it was everything. It was like everything coming, all of me. And I started working at one point with iLog. We were a French company, headquartered both in the Bay Area and in Gentilly, just outside of Paris. And we got acquired by IBM, and there was a whole portfolio of interesting things that opened up. And there was a whole lot more of software that had social impact, which for me was just opened up the canvas of things that could be done. And meanwhile, things were still percolating about, giving back. My seminary education was still there. Yeah. And, I continued in the field for quite a while, and I became an executive, and I helped a mid-stage startup get through a couple of acquisitions. We bought a couple of companies, including another.
When you were in IBM?
No, this was later when I was at Enroll.
Okay.
So I was on the leadership team for Enroll, and just had a great time. It was a wonderful experience. But when I had my final exit from Enroll, during that time, I really, when you and I met, actually, I think I was at Enroll
right
at the time. And I really wanted to take everything that I had learned in terms of design thinking process. While at IBM, I had learned design skills, as well as, I'm a software engineer, I'm an architect. I help with, there isn't a job in the software industry I haven't done. But I did heavy design work and design thinking at IBM. And I really wanted to try and solve a social problem with design thinking. And that's where Swiggle came into focus. So I founded a nonprofit called Swiggle, which was a software-oriented nonprofit, which no one had heard of at the time. There was clearly no money to do it, because at the time, the foundation's software at that time was very expensive, and the foundations didn't really understand what it meant to have social impact with software. That was just unheard of.
Yeah.
You buy software, you don't create software to solve a social problem.
Yeah. And especially it's very laborious in inputting the questions and then answers, and then in a very, I must say, it's a rigid format, right? Because right now we could just create a AI chatbot, right? Right. You put all the knowledge in.
This was all pre-chat GPT. Okay, this is
really manual. This is like what is it called? Like the cable operator. You have that question. I'll connect you to here. Questions.
It was a limited palette of technologies we had at the time, and we hadn't yet even introduced machine learning into that solution. But it was a Q&A. there was an algorithmic experience for matching questions to answers for the homeless ecosystem. And we did a lot of research in homelessness, and which is funny because at the time we started, I didn't know any homeless people. And what design thinking does is you find your primary personas and you have to know them deeply. And it was great because I had to go through and really understand what it was like to be homeless and have all the empathy for not just like the daily activities, the actions, and I discovered a whole lot. One, in one of my interviews, one of the people said, I had literally said to them, I don't know what it's like to be homeless. What's it like? And he said, well, it's a lot like camping. And while he talked a whole lot about what it was like and his processes and his hacks for living, he really helped me because I had been in Boy Scouts. It opened up this whole world of really understanding what it's like to live in the elements. And that is what led me to CHS and Adrien Walnoha, because we realized, well, we wrote some software, but now we need to really see if folks will use it. You know, we did our interviewing process. We got our feedback going, but now we needed partners and we needed help to do it. And that's what led us there. And so we really worked with folks doing the intake at CHS to try and use that Q&A format to help people who were trying to solve problems. Who in Pittsburgh does this? Who does this? Who solves this problem? And it was at that same time, those interviews gave a lot of help to decision makers within CHS, because we were reinforcing what some of them already knew. If you were homeless and you were partnered with someone who wasn't your spouse, and if you had a pet, pets were the big one, because at the time there were no shelters for anyone with pets, and they were not going to give up their pets. And then if you were, if you were non-binary or, whatever the case, whatever your pronoun, at the time there weren't a lot of options for you from in the homeless ecosystem as well. And then when you combine all of that, which happened, no one was going to get housed. And those were some pretty serious problems to work through. And I learned a lot by hanging with Adrien and others at CHS and just learning deeply. And we really did solve some problems with Swiggle. But at the time, one of the reasons that we ended up shutting it down was because we came before people knew how to handle it. Everyone believed that Big Berg was the only way to go. You only need one piece of software to solve a problem. They got all the funding, they got all the attention, but they really didn't solve the problem. They just became an intake and a bottleneck and other things. They did solve problems, but sometimes you need 5 or 6 ways with software to solve a problem. Yeah. But we couldn't get engagement at the time with the foundations because they didn't really understand the world of software. And so you could say I was a pioneer in trying to solve social problems.
Yeah, even software. When they do, that it's easier to only have one, one go-to organization. It's easy. You know the person, you know what they can and cannot do, right? Not that I'm defending them. It's like me. It's good to have one general contractor fixing your house.
It can be,
right?
And I may not. There's always a way to position things, and we were still learning as well in terms of finding what we call in software market fit. For what we had done. But I think there's plenty of room. Even today, there's plenty of room to apply software to a social problem. But at the time, the costs for cloud costs were extremely high. Software development was extremely expensive. And that economic landscape has all changed with AI. And now an individual using AI can generate code and the costs for developing software have come down so much that one person literally can write an app and start innovating. So long story short, we've never been alive at a better time because of the cost efficiencies to try and solve social problems with software. And we don't need a lot of funding to do it, but we do need help. And we need folks to be thinking out of the box. So if there's a thread to follow up on, that's one of them. I would really like to have more engagement with foundations on this very issue, because I don't think they understand what's available.
So where's Big Berg now?
I don't know. I don't know if they're still part of the intake process. I got busy with other projects, so I don't know. I don't know what happened to it.
I don't know about
that. We weren't trying to compete, but it was, we kept being forced into a competitive way of speaking about them unnecessarily, because it's like, well, how are you different from them? And it's like, well, yeah, we're going to differentiate, but this is the problem we're solving. But that's okay. Live and learn. I think things have changed a lot now. But
really,
a lot of software, or there's a lot of software being used by nonprofits now. They're using Salesforce. They're now getting more into custom software development. So I think software is finding its way into nonprofits in ways that you would expect.
But whether or not the foundations are going to fund the software endeavor or not, right? Because
it depends on their appetite.
Yes.
And how the problem is being solved.
Right.
So, but we'll see. I think there's a lot to be learned, and there's a much bigger impact we can have.
Yeah. So when you told me about that's Swiggle, right? And also about Big Berg, the use of phones at that time for them to
do the homeless have phones? Yes,
exactly.
They do.
Right. So I mean, yes, they do, but they play. I don't know, what is that bird?
Oh yeah,
I forgot.
Where you're shooting birds.
I forgot the name, but I know at that time
Angry Birds.
Angry Bird, right? I mean, they.
Well, and what's interesting, I had another friend. We didn't have free public Wi-Fi, or it was just starting around Pittsburgh at that time, which was a huge help to the homeless community.
Right.
And so when you think about all the foundational parts for a solution to happen, we were just at that point. There was free public Wi-Fi just happening. Mobile phones, especially smartphones, had just become widely available.
Yeah.
And so everything was happening, but again, we were really early in and suffered the consequences for that.
Yeah, and I don't know which site that I looked at. Probably it's not Big Bird or it's something else. Like at the website, and then I got to a page. I think probably it's a DHS, right? But then he gives me a phone number, right? As opposed to a solution, and then he gives me a phone number, and then I think one number is like, it's not 24-hour, right? It has like call back.
And this is one of the things we really learned later with Swiggle, and this is another theme that shows up in the research, is when you're experiencing trauma, and if you're hungry and you haven't slept, there's a kind of fog that enters in the decision-making process. And what we learned was that Swiggle was more of this is how you find information when you're feeling stable, when you're not hungry, when you're using a different part of your brain. And when people just really need something and they're being very survival about it, they're going to have they don't want information. They want the thing.
Yes, they want an immediate solution that can alleviate their
Swiggle
problem.
was not about getting them the thing right now, but they had to do some research. But it could handle complexity, which was nice because the ecosystem was complicated. It still is. It's fragmented, and the user journey through the homeless ecosystem and much of social services can be very fragmented still.
Okay. So now Pittsburgh has all this AI effort, robotics effort, right? Or I don't know, effort or projects or programs, whatever, even national programs, right, happening in Pittsburgh. And then if we tie those programs and with the homelessness and with the underserved neighborhoods that we have in Pittsburgh, do they make sense? I mean, are they still going to be forgotten, the underserved neighborhoods, or are they, how? Because for me, the gap is just going to be crazier.
It's accelerating the gaps between the underserved communities and what's happening in the economy. Certainly, if you don't have any stock portfolio, you're being left behind. It's going. The acceleration is just going like this, and even middle class families are being left behind. They have cars and TVs and pay rent, but if they don't have anything in the stock market, they don't realize how far and quickly the income gap is widening and accelerating. But back to your point about these investments, these technology investments, I do think that there is a way to close some of the gaps, either through software, AI, or just helping people become more aware of how they can problem solve. It's never been easier to solve a problem if you have a phone and a browser, and get really technical answers and how to strategize. But again, you have to think about it. If you can't imagine the question, you can't always get to the answer. And that was something else we learned about Swiggle. We had all the answers, but there's such drift in language and vocabulary between underserved communities and the technical language used by service providers. Language was a huge barrier.
Totally.
It still is.
Yeah.
So I think hopefully ChatGPT can start to connect the dots there for underserved communities to help them understand why things are the way they are.
But they can probably solve the problem or answer their questions for their immediate needs. For example, how can I get warm food today, right? Or which shelters that are open today, right? Or probably capacity, right? Which shelter that are still open and can still take me at 5:00 p.m., right?
Yeah, but a lot of the homeless people that I've met and interviewed didn't see homelessness as their primary problem. So they were living through several simultaneous problems. And they knew they were going to be homeless for a while.
Mm-hmm.
And so there were other problems they were trying to solve before that.
Okay.
But I think once they are housed, there's always several key problems to solve as they get into housing. But that was another surprise that we had, was like, well, okay, if you're okay with your certain housing situation, what's your next problem? We also learned that a lot of them knew where all the soup kitchens were, and they knew where to get food, and that wasn't their key problem either. They were trying to solve other higher level problems or financial problems or their next step. They were somehow blocked on more technical kinds of things unless they had just newly arrived in Pittsburgh.
Mm-hmm.
Which happens a lot too. A lot of times people come in on the bus and then they have to orient real quick. Like that's more of a now problem.
Yeah. So I think not that I participated, but I witnessed, or is this homeless simulation, right? I don't know what is it formally called. I remember Peter Harvey from DHS with Pastor Jennifer McCurry. Right, they had this in the basement, and I look at the and then I basically, they're already having problems with homelessness, and then they kind of threw a wrench, like, oh, your children are sick, right? But then you have to have an appointment, or even like before your kids can go to school, then you need an address, but you have no address, right?
The prerequisites just constantly block and get in the way.
Right, and you have no transportation.
Right.
And then when you have this appointment, say that you got called for a job, but then what are you going to do with your kids?
Right. So you can't work because, or you can't work because you have a dog, and there's no one to watch your dog. You can't take your dog to work. Right. So it's a series of things that constrain the situation.
So I'm curious about when you say the problems before homelessness. What are they?
Well, there are the problems we have. There's making money, thinking about the future, just taking that next step and figuring out all the constraints.
Oh, I thought they were after, because you have to find an address and home first before you can get a job.
In some cases, that's true, but there were places to work in Pittsburgh where you can just be a day laborer, and work for cash. I mean, there's things that you can do, and so everyone's different. And I think Adrien and others that have been doing this for so many years, they can answer more of this more thoroughly than I can. But I was just surprised at the complexity of it. And I do think information and access to people are just a really critical part of it. But I want to come back to language, because that's another theme that keeps coming up in my life, because I've had to study so many different languages. But I grew in Wenatchee growing up. I didn't realize it, but when I was home, when I was visiting my family after school, after college, I might still see some of my family members. My language would change from the college context into blue collar Wenatchee, South Wenatchee type language. And we talked about drift between homeless vocabulary and language, how they talk, and the technical language of service providers. And even in church, there's specialized language. And we're all speaking English, but there's these terms, and I hear this when I'm listening to people speaking Spanish all the time, that our language has defined elements of terms that the speaker may not know. And that just really gets in the way. And so learning these things, everyone is operating with like a horizon that is constantly changing. But if there's a block in that horizon, you can't take that next step. It's unknown. And I'm hoping that AI and ChatGPT can help folks bridge that gap. In fact, I've been writing about that in my novel. So I've published 2 novels. So instead of founding another nonprofit,
let me show the audience. I think let me just use this angle camera. See?
There we go.
There you go. Available in Amazon. I'm going to show you the link. Right.
Yeah, it's on Amazon. The first novel is actually the audiobook is out. It's narrated by Kate Redding and Michael Kramer. I think they won the 2000.
It's not Michael Kramer from Seinfeld, right?
No.
No. Okay, so I'm showing the book here.
Oh, there we go. So they the narrators, they won the 2022 Audio Award for Fantasy.
Oh,
so they're really
congratulations.
Highly sought after narrators. But the reason why I bring this up is because all these themes in my life, the social impact, the AI, thinking about language and lingual drift, and how all this fits into a narrative, I really wanted, and even the struggle to have to live through trauma, I wanted to explore these themes in story. And that's where Divide by Zero comes from. Because characters in the book live a long time. And as we live longer, we just accumulate trauma, and it becomes, for folks in the book who live an extremely long time, it's an amplification. Trauma on top of trauma amplifies. And even though they have very accessible AI at their disposal, and they have wealth, and they have many other things, they're quite limited in other ways.
Wow.
Which I think is interesting
You're right.
in the story, that things can get in the way, that trauma can become a barrier. And it's not technical, it's all emotional. So I just thought it was really interesting to really write about how people are still driven by purpose. Yes, it's science fiction, but hopefully to the reader, it doesn't feel like science fiction. It just feels like people trying to do something and then stumbling over themselves while they're trying to do it and discovering. One reader said, well, it's kind of like driving through a stormy night and you can just see right in front of the headlights. You don't quite know where you're going, but you can go the whole trip that way and you will finally get to your destination. You know, that's what it's like to live, and that's what it's like to experience a story. You don't learn anything until the characters learn it. But that's life.
Yeah, life is a journey.
You know?
And then, you're experiencing things that sometimes that you cannot imagine that, oh, we are here. We are doing this.
It just happens. Yeah.
And then you mentioned about the longer you live, or you alluding to that, the longer you live and the more trauma you have.
Yes.
That scares the shit out of me. It was like, okay, divide by 0 is infinity. So that's the amount of trauma that I'll have if I live forever.
Even if you're not homeless, our trauma can get in the way of learning. Just the other day.
Or there's some people that can only learn through trauma.
Well, and those would be really hard lessons.
Yes.
And the worst kind, perhaps. But I was trying to go have some imaging done at UPMC, and I had forgot my script. And a woman told me how to get to the imaging location. But because I was so worried about forgetting my script, I could not memorize the instructions that she gave me. Wow. My ability to remember was dramatically impacted by my worry. And I think that happens with a lot of people when they're suffering from something or they're overly worried. They can't really function the same as normal people. And I just think that's really interesting how it affects us. And in story, I think it's very human, and hopefully people can understand, because sometimes they're really smart. How could they not know that? But some of the smartest people, we've got the biggest blinders, and we can be really not smart.
Yeah. Or they cannot pick what kind of shirt they're wearing. That's why they wear shirts, the same shirts all the time,
right.
like Steve Jobs.
Right. Well, no, and sometimes you need people who are just smart in very different ways to point the way, and we have to rely on them to help point the way.
Right.
And that has been true throughout my life. And I've relied on those experts more often than not, and they come from the most unexpected places. And we really need to rely on them.
Yeah. So I think circling back on this underserved and homelessness. So I guess we do not yet have those people that can solve those problems.
Well,
I mean, homelessness, it's...
They are the experts. Now, if you ask me who's an expert in homelessness, I would say a homeless person is an expert. And today I've been helping I'm working with the founders of a software startup called Larrabee, heylarrabee.com. And we help experts explain what they do. Because when they go to train people, they're really bad at telling people how they solve problems, because it's so easy for them. They just don't mention it. And there's really important details in there. And I think when we interview the homeless or we interview other experts, that just happens. And it's like, no, wait,
by the way, I'm showing the audience the website. Yeah, sorry.
So we help experts, whether it's a surgeon or someone manipulating something in a biosafety cabinet, or they're using their hands to say, well, what's the best way to do that? And they're showing with their hands. But if you ask them to explain it, 5 words will come out of their hand, but then they'll have 30 or 40 different manipulation actions.
Yeah.
And those hacks, I mean, if you really watch someone, an expert doing something, they won't have a language about it. I'm working with Adrien again, Jeremy Carter, and another person now. Sorry, I'm forgetting their name. I'm spacing it. But we're working with about 15 different agencies in Pittsburgh right now, thinking Andrew Lee, just thinking about how can we use design thinking to improve the ecosystem for accessibility in Pittsburgh using design thinking. And again, we're interviewing experts. We're doing the same process. I don't know where it's going, but we'll see.
Yeah.
I'm pretty excited about it.
So, going back to, sorry that I cut you off earlier. So how is this Larrabee concept, where there's probably a new learning methodology or a learning modality, right? They call it, right? In helping people who are houseless, for the homelessness people. How can they?
Well, Larrabee is really a software company that's more commercial. But the underlying methodology for interviewing experts is squarely in design thinking. The same method that we're using to understand an expert is almost exactly the same method to interview a homeless person or to interview someone who lives their life in a wheelchair. It's just a way to have empathy and understand. And then sometimes you have to deconstruct what you've heard and then reconstruct it into a journey that they say they want. We don't get to judge. If you're following this methodology, it's like you need those people that you have the empathy for, those experts, and they have to say, oh, that's better. We don't get to say that. And that's how you know you're done. That's how you know you've solved the problem. So Larrabee is just the way to commercialize that, and we do great work, and it's really fun to be there. And it can have some social impact, but the work I'm doing with Adrien and Jeremy and Andrew right now, that's squarely focused using the same methodology for some social impact.
So can you provide a real example of, and then comparing the old ways and the new ways using this new methodology of learning, new ways of learning?
Well, one great example is there's always some kind of intake for a social service where you fill out a form like, well, what kind of accessibility issues do you have? What's your profile of need, as a homeless person? These are lists of things, and you can collect these all day long, learning different aspects of what your homeless condition is or what your accessibility condition might be. But what they don't do is tell the story end to end of how you solve problems. And if you're going to improve the lives of somebody, you can't do it from a fragmented questionnaire. It has to come from their journey in all those little steps, how they hack their way through it, how they solve this problem. Because if you're going to find impact, it has to be in that story. It can't be pulled out of context, and it takes time. You can't just land on it. You've got to put the time in to understand what's really going on to find the opportunity. And I think that's not happening right now when programs are being created, when funding is happening. People are making big assumptions that they know something, and they have huge gaps in their knowledge. And then they wonder why these programs aren't working or having the impact. You didn't really study it. You thought you did, but you didn't really break down the sequence of things. You didn't really deconstruct and reconstruct.
So is this program aiming to solve the problem comprehensively? Because a lot of programs, they're just doing specific, right? You sleep on the street, so we're going to house you. You are hungry, I'm going to feed you, but today, I don't know about tomorrow, right? But then you need this, I'm going to give you that, right? So there's no like a problem statement. You are homeless, and the end goal is not to be homeless and have a sustaining job.
I don't know if that is the right goal for everyone.
Okay.
And so that's an assumption that people...
from the house person.
Yeah,
yes.
From the homeless perspective, housing might not be their problem statement, solving their housing problem.
Right.
They may have several other problems before that. So that's why we need them to help guide us. For example, you might talk to someone who has a great hack for their wheelchair, that they know how to do something, but they don't even talk about it. And there might be thousands of other people that don't know the hack, or haven't tried this, or there's all these gaps that we have in a particular community that could solve a problem. And so it's like, I don't know. I believe that in these journeys, there's hundreds of hacks that we don't know about. Mm-hmm. And if we knew all the things that motivate people, like instead of thinking all negative about hurt and stuff, but thinking about what makes them happy, what makes them, what really makes them wonder about next, then we would know, well, how these dots connect to those experiences as well. And so I think it's just going to be a process of really showing how a solid journey through multiple passes can find opportunities for change, improvement. Is it going to solve the problem end to end? No. But we could have huge impact if we found gaps that we could solve. And that's all we can do. Less harm. I don't know the term. It's Adrien knows it. But there's a term out there where you're just harm reduction. You're trying to reduce harm. You're trying to improve when you can't completely solve a problem.
Yeah, so that's a different thinking. I mean, at least different from the way I think, right? I mean, I don't know. Like for me, I know that it's no longer true, but like in the back of my mind that it's probably easier. It's too simplistic. Let me say that. My brain is too simplistic in saying that there's a conveyor belt somewhere, right? It's like this is from point A to point Z, right? So now it's just a matter of where you are. Are you going to hop in on A, or are you going to hop in at H, or are you just like almost?
Well, that's something.
Right?
Every journey has multiple starting points.
Right, and then again, I just learned, and I learned it the hard way. Like a year or 2 years ago, that life is not linear. See how stupid I am. Like you go back, you make an iteration. You thought you're already at Z, and then you go back to H.
This is a really interesting point, because what I had discovered, because I've been in the business process modeling space for so long, where you model out workflows for business process.
Yes.
And I can tell you, the majority of business processes are not sequential. They are iterative and recursive.
Yes.
They go back like this.
They're agile. They're always like an exit door that leads to things in the past, right? It's like reject.
So when you actually create software that mimics that behavior, it's really complicated. And then you might have an executive say, it's not that complicated, Chris. It goes from here to here. And it's like, well, you're thinking like an executive at that point. That's not real, okay? The real world is complicated, and it does all this stuff. And you can solve it with software, but you have to take your time. And it might take some algorithms that you're not expecting because the world doesn't fit in this.
Yeah.
Unfortunately, that's life.
Yeah, but probably people working for Toyota and Honda do not agree with that. It's like, do it right the first time. Use the Kaizen and Kanban.
That's right. That's right. But they can't stop the conveyor belt. They can. I mean, Toyota has a process for fixing problems right now.
Right.
So there is an element of discovery even in something that's well codified. So, but that's kind of the story of my life. That's the story of this book, that we're going to really solve problems or have an impact. You're going to have to iterate. You're going to have to go at it not knowing if it's solving the problem. Some call it the rock method. Is this the rock you're looking for? Is this the rock you're looking for?
Like talking to a 5-year-old. Or like, are we there yet? So I guess it builds character.
Yes.
When you're asked that so many times that, for honestly, I was not kidding when I just learned this the hard way, like only 1 to 3 years, that life is not linear.
No.
Right.
And we're not done.
We're not done until,
we all know the end point,
you think, right? You don't know.
Birth is the leading cause of death. Okay. So, so we do know the end point.
Is this conspiracy? All right, going back to your book, and I never about birds. All right, so are these books pretty much written about you?
No, I think there's a little bit of me in each of the characters.
Are you the hero or are you the villain?
I'm in everything, actually. But it's a series, and Divide by Zero starts with one of the primary characters, Winston. He's a Princeton mathematician. So from that point of view, there's a little bit of me in that. But the woman he meets, Maria, there's a little bit of me in her, and some other characters, Catherine, there's some of me in Catherine. Some of the experience of being a leader in some high stakes scenarios that plays out in some of the characters. But it's a series, and there's 2 right now, and then there will be a final third that I'm going to start in January.
I thought you were busy.
Yeah. Well, what's interesting is that when I write, it's a lot how I live, which is I write chapter to chapter. I do not have a plan. I do not have an outline. And I write the next chapter after the next chapter, and I never change the order. So the reader is experiencing my writing structure and my discovery at the same time.
Wow.
And I've had I've done different kinds of analyses on the text, and a lot of the readers, those who don't mind learning a little bit at a time, they like it. I'm not spoon feeding anyone, but it seems to work. And apparently Asimov and Herbert, even Dan Simmons wrote similarly. I think even some of them were PhD dropouts. So I guess I've got good credentials. Good credentials. I didn't go to seminary. And what science fiction doesn't have theology in it?
Could be a trauma-driven method.
That's right. School of Hard Knocks. So there's a little bit of that in there too. So, but it's just been a real great journey for me.
I guess, I thought, honestly, when you told me about after you wrote the first book, it's like, okay, there's no need for a second book. But it's like second, no, you're writing the third one. It's like, okay, all right. Awesome.
It's very cathartic to write, because you have to have empathy for all the characters. And I find that helps me when I'm interviewing other people or working with customers, or even in ministry. It really it helps a lot to just slow down and listen. And I have to listen to my own characters Otherwise, they're not consistent.
Yes. So do you have like a war room kind of storyboard where
Nope.
you laid out,
Nope.
this person's gonna do this, this person did shit this.
I sit down and I just finish one chapter, and you see that blinking cursor on the next chapter, and I put a sentence in, and I run from there.
Wow. So you must have a good memory.
Well, I can remember what happened before.
I don't even remember what I ate yesterday.
Well, but it's interesting. I interview a lot of my readers, and they can't remember what they read. And I don't know if it's just my editors remember the story, but it's very unsatisfying, actually, to interview your reader. Oh, it was great. I liked it. What, just like the last hamburger you had? Or that was it? What, So, but it's been a lot of fun. So I hope to keep doing that as long as I can.
Okay. So what is the common thread, that for all the things that you've been doing, that you're continuing to do, for things that you love, for things that you hate, for things that whatever that define, what is it that defines you from all of this stuff?
I think I'm an adventurer, ultimately, with a sense of mission, a sense of creativity. But ultimately, I love solving problems. I love it. I love, the dopamine hit from, knowing that might work, and finding something in the unexplored, in the gaps where people aren't looking. So I think there's that element. One person described me as, you have too many passions. Maybe on the surface it seems like that, but that's not how I experience it.
Yeah,
I love solving problems or understanding something. I like slowing down. Everything to me is a narrative.
Yeah, I think that when people have all this, seems to have variety of things on their plate, so many passions, there's always a common thread, right?
Yeah.
There's always something that kind of ties them all together.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
So awesome.
Well, thank you for having me. This has been great, and I hope people
thank you for liking
find some value out of this, and maybe you'll hear more from the research that we're doing.
Yes, please do. Please let me know. And I like to see that all 90 neighborhoods of Pittsburgh thrive with this AI and robotics and the new journey that we're all going to have for the next 10, 20 years. And I hope that not only Shady Side, Squirrel Hill, only certain neighborhoods.
There's a lot of opportunity. I mean, the cost to write software is now so low that I believe we will start seeing just a multitude of new ideas. Some won't work at all. But the ones that will, I think they could have a big impact.
Yeah.
So we'll see.
And hopefully they will improve those underserved neighborhoods.
Yeah.
Yeah. All right. Thank you very much, sir.
Yeah. Thank you.
Thank you.
Appreciate it.